To order the City of Apache Junction Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday evening, August 13th at 7 p.m. And I would ask everyone to stand with me as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, Rudy.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Present.
Vice Chair Heck.
Present.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Here.
Commissioner McGraw.
Here.
Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Commissioner Howard, and Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Howard is out of town this evening. And also Chairwoman Nesser has a medical procedure today, won't be able to join us. But we do have a quorum, 5 present, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Rudy. Okay, and we will now have the approval of the agenda. So do I hear a motion on the consideration of the approval of the agenda for this evening?
Commissioner Heck,
Yes, sir.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Roll call, Rudy?
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Yes.
Chairman Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner McGraw.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes. We're now consideration of approval of the July 23rd, 2019 regular meeting minutes and the July 30th, 2019 and August 1st, 2019 special meeting minutes. So do I have a motion on the approval of those minutes?
Commissioner Heck,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the minutes from the July 9, 2019 regular meeting, the July 30, 2019, and August 1st, 2019 special meetings.
Very good. Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second. I have a second. Roll call. Rudy?
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Yes.
Chairman Heck.
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Lack of detail, no.
Commissioner McGraw.
Yes.
4 in favor, motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Rudy. Okay, now we move on to our public hearing section, and we have item 19-393. It's a presentation, discussion, and public hearing and consideration of case PZ-5-19, proposed city-initiated corrective rezoning of approximately 5 acres from RS-20M, that's medium-density, single-family detached residential, to RSGR, that's general rural, low-density, single-family detached residential.
Good evening, Commissioners. So as you said, tonight's presentation is...
Can you flip? Can't hear. Can you, is it? Maybe it's not on.
Thank you.
Now we're cooking.
Good evening. So as you said, tonight's presentation is concerned with the city-initiated rezoning of Greasewood and Ironwood Street. There's 4 parcels. And these 4 parcels are the subject site. They're all 1 acre and a quarter parcels located on the south side of Greasewood between Ironwood Drive and Gold Drive. PZ 519 is a corrective zoning of these 4 parcels, totaling 5 acres, again from RS-20M, or medium-density single-family residential, to RSGR, which is general rural, low-density single-family residential. It is considered a corrective rezoning because prior to 2014, the zoning designation for the subject properties was GR, or general rural. However, when the city adopted a new zoning ordinance and zoning district maps in 2014, the subject properties were inadvertently zoned to RS-20M, which has a much smaller minimum lot size and has different setbacks and regulations. This issue is brought to our attention following the complaint of one of the property owners. Staff has observed that the lot sizes at these 4 parcels, again, are 1 and a quarter acre each, which is more than twice at the minimum lot size under the current RS-20M zoning designation. So the proposed zoning, RSGR, or the general rural, has a minimum lot size of 1 and a quarter acres each, and the setback and accessory building regulations are appropriate for such lot sizes. which ultimately benefits the property owners. Also of note, as a normal requirement of a rezoning process, the city requests the dedication of the FPEs, the federally patented easements, which are portrayed in light blue here on this map, so that they may become the city's right-of-way, which is portrayed in light green. This dedication process will not affect the privileges of the RSGR zoning, such as horse privileges or anything like that, and it will assist the city's operation of these roadways in the future. And of note, all 4 property owners have been sent a letter regarding this process and regarding the idea of the dedication of these easements. So given these facts, planning staff recommends the approval of the proposed corrective zoning subject to conditions in order to allow property owners to develop their property according to their respective lot size with all the privileges pertinent to the RSGR lots. And if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the
Thank you.
commission? I don't really think so. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there are any that wish to speak in relation to this case, please come forward. I would ask, though, that just understand that any comment must be related to this case and this case only. So do we have anyone that wants to give testimony? Please come on up. Please state your name and address for the commission, please.
My name is Tad Jansen, 1519 West Greasewood. We have 3 property owners here represented today. Our 4th is on vacation. So anyway, 3 of the 4 of us are here. This is definitely appreciated, the city going through the effort of reinitiating this and rezoning this, potentially. We appreciate that greatly. There was definitely some restrictive things because of its current zoning designation, and going back to the GR will definitely be a help to us with some of the things that we've been wanting to do with our property. So we definitely appreciate the city taking this on and correcting the issue as it stands. So that's really all I have to say. I appreciate it very much.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to give testimony? Yes, ma'am. Please come on up. Again, please state your name and address for the commission.
Tricia Bybee, 1431 West Greasewood. I actually have a couple issues. One is my address is wrong on these maps. And every week I get phone calls and letters from realtors and investors wanting to buy my property at 1331 West Greasewood, which would be the middle of that field down there. And anyway, even when I had my house appraised this spring, there was an issue with that. It comes addressed to me at my 1431, but it always says my property at 1331. I was wondering if there's a way to get that changed so it will stop. Also, the second thing is that between Greasewood and Superstition, that gold is not a street. There's a big double arrow sign there, right? Which I assume, you're taking part of my property for that, and I share that with the city according to the letter. But why are the people who live behind me allowed to use it as a driveway? They're driving up and down there all the time, tearing up the dirt and making a big mess and dust flying everywhere. The guy that lived there until a couple of months ago had 3 semis, and they were rumbling up and down there all the time. And on the weekends, they just parked out in that field. But he's gone, luckily. But the new one has a welding business. He also has a couple of big trucks that are rumbling up and down there all the time. So, is that street closed or not? And why are they allowed to use it as a driveway?
Yeah, I don't,
I can answer
We-
that question, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like.
yeah, please, Rudy, if you would able to do so. Or we,
Wait,
this is a public hearing, so.
Well, yeah, but wait after her time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. When you're done, we will,
And that's all I really have to say. I was just wondering, like I said, why that's permitted.
okay.
He could just as easily have made a driveway at the front of his property.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to give testimony?
My name is Tammy Lechner, and I live at 1467 West Greasewood Street. I also appreciate the fact that we are talking about this today. It's been quite some time in the making, and I feel that the current zoning of our property is limited. There is future development that I would like to do with my property, and currently I can't do it. I also want to make sure that the future owners of my property would have that same opportunity, because someday I will sell that home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to give testimony? No. Okay, and I'll consider the public hearing closed. Rudy, are you able to give some insight on?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The aerial image that you see up on the screen, you see two colors here, the darker green and the lighter green, or the blue-green, whatever you want to call it. These are called, the light green areas are called federally patented easements. In Apache Junction, depending on what part of town you're in, you will find these easements either around 10-acre cells, 2.5-acre cells, 5-acre cells. In this particular part of town, the original 10-acre cell is surrounded by what's called a federally patented easement. These are easements that were established by the federal government probably back in the 30s and 40s. They are reserved for roadway purposes. Now, these folks own to the center of that easement. That's what we call the gross property dimension. When we say 1.25 acres, the measurement is actually to the center of the easement. So they own it, they pay taxes on it, but those easements cannot be used for anything except roadway and utility purposes. And for example, when someone proposes to put a building on a property, the setback is typically measured from the inside edge of the easement, not from the middle of the road. Now, with regard to gold specifically, it is an easement. Not all of these easements are always open as roadways, and sometimes our Public Works Department maintains them, and sometimes they don't, depending on how many properties may need to use any given easement. So along the east side of what's labeled here as 1331, the easement is there. The neighbor to the south uses that easement to access their property. Probably the main reason is because at the southwest corner of their property, in other words, right at the intersection of Gold and Superstition, there is a great big box culvert that kind of is located right where that road should connect to Superstition. So that person would literally have to either get access directly off of Superstition or perhaps on a property to the west to access their property. For whatever reason, they choose to come down Greasewood to get to their lot. So when we talk about dedication of right-of-way, we are requesting that the neighbors would dedicate the adjacent federally patented easements on their properties. It reduces a little bit of liability if someone gets an accident on Greasewood Street and an individual still owns it. There's a little bit of potential liability there. Their property tax burden would probably be lightened just a little bit, since that stretch of land would be dedicated to the city. So there are benefits. It doesn't hurt them as far as their horse privileges or any other privileges enjoyed in the GR zone. And that's why we see these easements, once again, sometimes open as roadways, sometimes not.
Okay, thank you. So then the intersection of Gold and Superstition actually isn't a through, that's not a through.
There is a drainage structure.
Okay, all right, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, impeding possible access there. Of course, in the future, it might be moved, but right now there is a significant drainage structure there.
So all of the properties that are in consideration now, they all have access from Greasewood.
Yes, sir.
So the south of that, those other properties, they have, I guess they get onto it from Superstition.
Yes.
I got it, okay, all right. Okay. Okay, with that, I understand. Any questions, any comments? Are you able to do anything about the incorrect address?
Yes.
We are, okay,
Yes, we
All right.
will send out an address correction notice and get that taken care of.
okay, very good, thank you, Rudy. Okay, so since the public hearing is closed, again, I'll ask, any comments, any discussion from the commission? All right, hearing none then, I am willing to hear a motion related to case PZ-5-19.
Commissioner Heck,
Yes, Michael.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Apache Junction City Council the approval of Plan Development Rezoning Case PZ-5-19. A city-initiated request to rezone 5 acres located at the southeast corner of West Greasewood Street, North Ironwood Drive, from RS-20M, medium-density, single-family, detached residential, to RSGR, general rural, low-density, single-family, detached residential, subject to the following condition. The property owner shall dedicate necessary right-of-way to the City of Apache Junction along the bordering street fronts, which are Greasewood Street, Ironwood Drive, or Gold Drive, as applicable.
Very good, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second, thank you very much. I have a second. Roll call, Rudy?
Commissioner McGraw,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanchey,
Yes.
Chairman Heck,
Yes.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. This case will move on to the city council on what date, Nick?
I believe September 3rd.
September 3rd.
Very good, thank you. Okay, and that's all we have for public hearing, so we'll move on to old business. And we have item number 19-392. It's presentation and discussion of proposed amendment to Apache Junction City Code, the design standards for public and private development. Hi, Heather?
Good evening. My name is Heather Patel, and I'm with Development Services. I would like to start off by saying this is not my area. I do not do P&Z stuff. I do not do any planning stuff. So we're going to see how this works out. Okay. So a couple times we have brought, Larry has specifically brought before you some information on public art and establishing a commission and a program for that. So this evening, we're specifically going to be talking about Volume 2, Chapter 1. Other associated changes that we have in play or will be bringing before you are Volume 1, Chapter 2, which actually creates the commission, and Volume 1, Chapter 4, which puts out the fees. So very extensive timeline here. As you can see, we're currently having a discussion with you. We'll be back on the 27th for a public hearing, and then it will go to the City Council with the hopes that we can get this program initiated and started in January. So I am going to be addressing, I guess, some of the key things that the Commission has brought up in previous meetings. In your packet, you do have a draft of the ordinance, which there has been one more addition after that, which primarily has some grammatical things, changing a few words and things, and I'll see if we can address any of those if they're relevant. But all of the information that we put before you on this ordinance is based upon recommendations that we received from a consultant who was requested to help us with this by looking at other communities that have public art programs. And some of the recommendations are based upon what our development is here in the city. The amendment does include a whole list of things, which are listed up there. And it wasn't my intention to go through each and every single one of these, but I just did want to throw those up there to you. Basically, what is eligible for having or to be a part of the public art program is different types of development. So first we have our private development, and those would be different mixed-use projects, commercial projects, if we're expanding on an existing structure, and different multi-phased projects, religious, nonprofit organizations. Public projects would be our capital improvement, or the city's capital improvement program or projects. This does not include things like paving projects. But if, say, for example, we were to build a new building somewhere, we would want to incorporate public art into it. If we did a very large-scale redevelopment of a road area, say, for example, like North Apache Trail, when we did that, we had the whole new cross-section put in there. That type of project, we would then incorporate public art into. Of course, this information is all for future projects, not past. Okay, so how are we assessing how much is going to be imposed on different projects? So for example, the private projects, we would want to, and we're recommending a 1% of the construction costs. And so later on in this chart, you'll see the difference between them putting the art on their project or contributing it to a fund that the city can then collectively use for projects, for example, like the roundabout, okay? So based upon the square footage of the building being built, we have a different breakdown. So if it's less than 5,000 square feet, which is like a lot of, say, fast food restaurants, they would be imposed a 0.25% fee for doing public art. If it's 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, it goes up to 0.5. If it's over 10,000 square feet, it's 1%. We do have a cap at a maximum of 100,000. So, you know, if in theory, if 1% of a project ended up being $200,000, they would not have to contribute anything more than 100. In a multifamily project, this would not be for small, like duplexes. It would be for 10 units or more, and that would just be a 1% of the cost, the construction costs. City projects, public projects, this would be for projects over $50,000 or more and would be 1% of the cost, unless there is a restriction on the funding agency. So if we were to get, say, grant funds for a particular project that is over $50,000, but they do not allow us to set aside funds in the budget for public art, then we wouldn't be able to. Renovation projects, again, this would be for existing buildings if we make a change of 50% or more to the floor area, and that would be 1% of the cost, the construction cost. So public art, very lengthy. I'm not reading it to you because I know that can be very boring. But we do want to point out that public art needs to be viewed all the time by the public. So say, for example, if it was a private project and it was an office building that had a restricted area and they wanted to put the public art there, that would not be allowed. It would have to be in an area where anybody can see it and at a minimum for 40 hours during the week. Public art is not considered basic functional items like a bike rack or a bench or grates or whatever else is listed up there. There has to be something more to it, something artistic to it. In some cases, those things can be if there is a very artistic element to it. And that would be left up to the commission to decide on some of that. Another thing, definition of what an artist is. So this definition here was specifically received from the consultant that I mentioned earlier that we have sought some assistance with. And so it is, they're just, I think key parts are they have sort of a portfolio. They have peers that recognize their work, that they've had stuff in production, that they have some experience, and specifically in public art when it comes to, like for the city's projects anyways. When we want to do the roundabout, we will specifically look for public artists, not just an artist, but a public artist. So stuff that they've been able to demonstrate and show that they have done things in that realm before. And specifically that that person needs to be the primary designer or creator of the piece of art that they are listing as their experience. So this little chart is different from what is in your packet. We made a modification to this simply because we had changed the percentage and did that 0.25, 0.5, and 1%. We made those changes but failed to change this chart in the draft that you have. So this is the new proposed one. So essentially, if their valuation is less than $50,000, then that's going to be a very small dollar amount on their percentage that they would be contributing, not enough to actually put something on their project. So that money would just solely go to the fund, and that is the fund that is the pot that we would use for large city projects. If a project is valued, again, between $50,000 and $49999, they could do any combination. So they could put something on their property. They could then say, okay, the balance, of course, again, the cap is $100,000. Say they wanted to do a piece of public art that was 75, and they had to do a whole 100. They could give the other 25 to the fund. And then projects that are greater in value over $5 million, they would have to do a project on their site that is a minimum of $50,000, and then anything over that would go to the fund. So I hope that makes sense. I had to read that a few times myself to make sure I got it right. In your packet, you received a lovely little chart of comparable communities of who does public art programs through their capital improvement program and or private development. So it does list quite a few communities on here. And there's a few communities that maybe once had a program but no longer, or are looking to start a program, just haven't gotten it done yet. So this information was assembled by one of the interns. Thank you, sir. And so I think there's quite a bit of detail and information on here about that. Glendale does 2%, so that's a lot higher than our 0.25, 0.5, and 1%. So, you know, with this program, it's very hard because there can be 100 different ways that you formulate this. So we're just trying to find the best medium point to address all of the concerns that we've heard both from the commission as well as the council. So our next step is a public hearing before you on the 27th. And after that, hopefully, we can get it to the city council. It would be our plan. Just want to throw up the city's mission and vision. We like to make sure that we share that as much as possible. And if you had any questions, I'd hopefully try to answer them. Please be kind.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Any questions? Heather, I have a couple questions. So back to that chart that showed if the program's, there you go, if that project's going to be 5 million or greater, it has to be a minimum of 50,000. Maybe just to make clear, that could be, doesn't have to just be one piece. It could be multiple. I mean, if you had several pieces of iron structures or things, something like, you can do more than just one particular
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, okay. So if the city ever finally decides on the dedicated dog park, would that be something that then you'd have to have public art for a dog park?
Yep,
Okay, cool,
absolutely.
all right. Oh, and the last thing, the consultant that got the information on these other cities, did he give any information that they've had pushback from the citizens, the residents of those cities, kind of, because one of the things I think we struggled with is it seemed like we're hitting businesses, right in the pocketbook, and so I don't know, did he mention that there has been any pushback from folks in those cities?
The list specifically that you have before you was done by the intern, so I don't know what information was collected on that end. However, our consultant did actually work for and created commissions on several of these communities. And she's also worked up in Nevada. And so she did not feel that there was any pushback. Not only did she create the programs, but on some of them she worked them for some time. And she felt that the majority of the developers were wanting to do public art anyways. So this was just a, I guess a bonus.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Heather.
Yes.
So any other questions? No? Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Heather.
See you on the 27th.
Yep. Okay, so then we move on to the next item on the agenda is item number 19-390, the presentation and discussion of the proposed 2020 general plan.
Good evening, Commission. As mentioned in their last meeting, we were to cover 4 chapters tonight. Unfortunately, since we're short 2 commissioners, we're only going to cover 3 out of the 4. We're going to skip land use for tonight, since it is really the heart of the general plan, and it may take a bit of time to discuss. So we're probably going to table that until our next regular scheduled meeting on August 27th, and we'll have that discussion at that time. So with that said, we'll cover the Chapter 12 intergovernmental element, and then we'll go through amending the general plan and then the implementation and reporting of the general plan. If anyone needs extra copies of the general plan, we have some up front. You also have it in front of you on your screen. Chapter 12 is the intergovernmental cooperation element. It's really an element to reduce redundancy and increase efficiency amongst other government agencies or entities that work with the city. As the first chapter clearly says, it's to really, and it avoids intergovernmental conflicts. An example of that would be the agreements that we have with the Unified School District in terms of usage of parks, and also the agreements that we have with the City of Mesa and Queen Creek in terms of our planning boundaries. The document goes through kind of 2 sets of those entities that we work with. We have a primary, which are the most common entities that we work with, and then we have a kind of a secondary category that we have as well. We have areas of coordination that I just mentioned. We're working with schools, we're working with adjacent municipalities, we're working with the water district, we're working with the sewer district in terms of limiting any more future septic systems, and we're also working with public transit through CAG and MAG. Opportunities for collaboration include the management of water, as we discussed in our last meeting, some planning principles in terms of compact growth. So this section here talks about really limiting development to where utilities are already located, And then the possibility of also annexing county islands and bringing them into the city. And then then we have two goals at the end of this chapter, really reiterating the text found above. Does anybody have any questions regarding this element?
Sydney,
Commissioner McGraw.
why is it such a problem to get county islands?
Yeah, that's what I want to know,
Yes.
too.
That's what I want to know.
In my experience, there's been a hesitance from people located in county islands because they're typically less restricted when it comes to ordinance and regulations, so they kind of have an easier time with, managing their property to their liking. There's also a misconception, at least here, that their taxes would go up. But since we don't have a property tax, that wouldn't be the case here in Apache Junction.
So, and see here, it says that the city, they want to stand by their commitment to not extend water or sewer services without annexation.
That's correct, yeah.
So, but I mean, there are county islands right now that have the water and sewer. And am I correct? I think I understand that technically county islands are to be serviced by, in terms of law enforcement, by the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. But if I understand, typically it's AJPD that responds. Maybe Joel, can you?
Well, if there's an emergency, AJPD will definitely respond. And if it turns out to be something that there's a case, PD may turn it over to the sheriff's office. But typically, the city will respond if it's an emergency, and that does happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
I also want to add, another reluctance is the owners of these properties typically do not live in Arizona, and they are landlords. And some of them treat them as a slum type of housing, and they just, I think we did a survey, Rudy, maybe 12, 13 years ago?
Yeah.
For an area called that, it's not a very nice name, it's called Dog Patch,
Oh,
but
all right.
but basically, I forget how many hundreds were sent out, and very few owners responded, and most of those were out of state. So they don't want the hassle.
And misinformation rumors sprung up, like if we agree to annex, the city's gonna force us all to hook up to sewer, and, the city mentioned the taxes.
Yeah.
The moment somebody mentions annexation, a lot of misinformation starts
Right.
being generated.
However, the city just has really no recourse then?
Well,
I mean, that's just
under
food
annexation law, you have to have a majority of owners willing to be annexed by signing an annexation petition, and that 50-plus number of property owners must also represent at least 50% of the land value. So you have to satisfy two criteria whenever you propose an annexation. You may have a majority of owners, but if they don't represent at least 50% of the land value, you can't annex them. So the large property owners, a lot of times, hold the cards in some of these annexations. It's a formula, it's a process you have to go through, and unless you have cooperation or folks requesting to be annexed from the get-go, it's could be a difficult process.
And I guess it probably puts the AJPD in kind of an ethical dilemma if there's an emergency and they say, well, it's not our problem, and they just don't respond, then obviously that could be
Mr. Chair?
frowned on.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Pardon?
That's not a problem. There's memorandums of understanding between the AJPD and Pinal County. Any incident that AJPD would be responding to that is actually within a county island would essentially be an agency assist, and they would they would handle an initial investigation until Pinal County arrives, and then they turn it over to them.
Okay, because I guess where I was going with that was, I know that the PCSO response time could be substantial.
Correct, and as Mr. Stern said, in the emergency where AJPD is closer,
Yeah.
and has the ability to respond and take care of life and death situations, that would be the case. But once again, it's an agency assist. It's turned over to Pinal County, so the case itself would not be AJPD.
My concern here is if these folks that own these properties are, for all intents and purposes, slumlords. These properties are then occupied by folks who are paying rent to these slumlords. And there has to be some kind of municipal ordinance that's going to say to these slumlords, you've got to keep your property in such a condition that is going to meet habitable concerns to the folks. What do we say about that, Joel?
Well, once annexed, the city rules apply. And the city council just passed the property maintenance code, which is a very, very good code. But, and the county has a code too, but, you know, maybe there's an enforcement issue. The county has just so many code officers for the entire county, and I don't know how much resources they put in Apache Junction. And if you look at some of those properties, you wonder, do they even have a code compliance division? So I don't know, and that's up to the supervisors to decide where the resources go.
So this is where we really do need to speak to our county supervisor then.
You start with the supervisor, and the supervisor will then delegate it to probably a different department. But they do have code compliance, and, you know, if you make a complaint, they will come, but you gotta make a complaint. I don't know how proactive they are on complaints. I don't know if they go looking for code issues. I don't know if they have the time to do that. And I don't know what their policy is. Maybe Rudy knows, but I don't know what their policy in Pinal County is up in this area.
We seem to get more cooperation on the health and safety types of concerns, you know, green pools, standing water, West Nile virus kind of things. Other types of complaints, you know, tend to get put on the back burners, particularly the minor things that they might consider minor, small property infractions, things like that. Although we have gotten some pretty good cooperation on vendors parking on the edge of the city and selling things. So it's kind of hit and miss, but it seems to me, my observation has to be it's more health and safety related when they really respond.
Mr.
So-
Chair. Rudy, we're kind of focusing on the dog patch area, which essentially would be kind of the slum area, so to speak. But we have to remember that there are a lot of the mobile home parks that are in the counties. And a lot of those places are actually very nice. I don't know how much of corporation, you know, like Can-Am or something like that, how they're owned or, you know, in that respect. But does the city have any liaison with any of those people and informing them, educating those owners or their points of contact to let them know that while maybe in other states, you know, taxes will go up because of the city tax, that's not the case here. So that might change their point of view through education of their respective representatives. Do we have anything like that going on? And if not, can we get it going on and implement it in one of these goals?
Yes, we can make more contacts. We do have contacts with Health Department. We do have contacts with the code officer who works the area.
I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the representatives from the mobile home parks,
Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure that those are corporate owned.
yes.
And as the city, we need to educate their people that their taxes are not going to go up, and in return, or in turn, their representatives let those residents who are renters know that their property taxes are not going to go up.
Right. We have had that type of outreach, but not necessarily a concerted effort.
Okay, I think that's something that might be an idea or an avenue to at least look at, put it in the goals to start looking down that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Joel?
If I'll clarify a little bit, if it's a mobile home subdivision, meaning each individual owns their lot, you're correct, the taxes won't go up. If it's a mobile home park where the spaces are rented to individuals, well, we have a rental tax in Apache Junction, and it is 2.4%. So that has been an issue in the past where we've tried to get the park owner to come into the city, and they say, well, so I'll have to charge my tenant 2.4%. Well, you'll have to collect it and give it to us. Yes, that's how, or it actually goes to the state, but So that part of the tax, there is that tax, but generally speaking, a tenant doesn't pay property tax. But you would think that the owner would try to include that in part of the rent to get back some of the property taxes that the owner is paying for all 50 spaces, or whatever it is. But it's a tough issue, and it's not just, there's other areas too. It's not just along Tomahawk. There might be, if you want to annex, maybe to the east of here, there's been issues regarding that. And that's been talked about at different levels with supervisors and other council members. And there's pros and cons, and some people don't want to be in the city. Some people do not shop in the city because they hate the city. They do not want to pay to help the city out with with a sales tax. I mean, there are people that do that. There's some, and I'm not saying all winter visitors do that. In fact, I think it's less than 1%, but some people are outspoken about it.
That's asinine,
Well,
completely asinine.
sometimes it comes up,
I've heard it.
and it's unfortunate. It really is.
And that brings me back to, in the beginning of this chapter, second paragraph in the introduction, where we talk about potential areas of conflict generally revolve around annexation issues and competitions for sales tax base. I'm not getting a whole lot out of that, so can you kind of explain that a little bit more deeply to me?
Commissioner Early, are you speaking specifically about the sales tax base?
Yeah, and the annexation issues.
Well, again, I think the annexation issues are the misconceptions of the requirements post-annexation to the city. So that's what we're really speaking about in that first part of that sentence there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, I guess we'll move on.
And I did
Oh.
have areas of coordination, and the other, underneath schools, where we say the city has little, if any, coordination with the public charter schools. Can you give me the rationale for that, or is that just because they are private?
That is my understanding. I'm not sure of the history on that. Perhaps Rudy could help me with the history and how the city has had a relationship with charter schools here.
Usually at the beginning, when they're getting established, we have several. We have Apache Trail High School. We have the one down on San Marcos, and there's a new one that's moving into one of the churches down on Superstition. Once they get established,
Imagine Prep too.
Imagine
Imagine
Prep is
Prep.
another one, right? So the coordination is usually up front. Joel has explained to us that under state law, basically, they are treated like public schools. And, once the school's established, they're kind of on their own. Unless they need something, for example, when Apache Trail High School needed to acquire some adjacent land to create a parking lot, of course, we coordinated with them and the improvements and size of parking stalls, a little bit of landscaping, that kind of stuff. But in general, unless it's at the higher levels, typical staff does not deal with charter schools too much on a day-to-day basis.
So again, the charter school reaches out to the city when they need something.
Right.
But the city reaches out to them and they don't really,
They don't
really
reciprocate.
respond, yeah.
And
level.
I have a real problem with the use of the word public charter schools there. And the reason I have a problem with that is because I look at charter schools with the one word, and I will describe it as profit. That's what a charter school is in business, to create a profit for its owners. So the use of the word public there is kind of a misnomer.
Tell us what you think, Shirley.
Oh, I certainly will when it comes to public education.
Yeah, I hear you, I hear you. Okay, any other comments on that chapter? Okay, Sydney, you'll go from,
And
Thank-
I
oh,
do have another,
sorry.
when we look at on-site septic systems, and we say we must encourage existing and future development to connect to a municipal sanitary sewer system. Here again, we have, and I don't know how widespread this is, but I know that we do have areas of Apache Junction that are not only on septic systems that are on private water supply, and I also know that there are areas of Apache Junction who have absolutely no water supply system at all. They have to haul water. So where in this plan are we doing anything with respect to supplying those areas of Apache Junction that have Zippo with respect to water supply? Is that addressed here anywhere?
Commissioner Uli, I don't think this is the document that would address that.
Okay.
I think that document would be the water and sewer master plan, perhaps in coordination with the CIP plan. This plan is really just discussing any additional future development should be tie into the existing sewer, but not per se where those lines are to be located and how to connect.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe for clarification for me, that I guess I'm perceiving this general plan to essentially be for the city proper. There are outlying areas that would not be included. Is that?
That is correct,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Because I don't know, maybe you know, Shirley, are there homeowners in the city proper who do not have water service and they have?
I have an understanding that there
Oh,
is.
okay.
I think there are.
There are? Okay, I know some folks that live up by the mountain and all, and north of us, and they haul water, but I didn't realize it would actually be in kind of the city.
Yeah, not all parts of the town, of the city are served by Arizona Water or AJ Water.
AJ Water.
Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
just like many
That-
parts of the city are still not served by sewer.
Yeah, that I didn't realize. Okay.
Some people have their
Learn
own wells, it's kind of different scenarios.
Right. Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Let's go.
All right. So the next two chapters of the general plan are really the administrative chapters. These two chapters haven't really changed at all in terms of procedures or really thresholds between what a minor and general plan amendment is. This portion of amending the general plan talks about what is a minor, what is a major, when those applications are due, and when they will be reviewed and presented at P&Z and council, and how many times, how many votes of how many approval votes would you need? So in this case, it would need a 2/3 majority vote for a major general plan amendment. It also talks about a 60-day review. So once we receive a major general plan amendment, we need to advertise that with the agencies outlined here in the bullet points. So other adjacent municipalities and things like that. We also talk about the threshold for major general plan amendments, and really they're all 10 acres. So if it's changing from commercial to residential or residential to commercial, and it's more than 10 acres or more, then that's the threshold for a major general plan amendment. If it's less than that, then it's a minor general plan amendment, and that can be done at any time of the year concurrently with the zoning. So it's really treated the same way as a zoning case. Let's see. Here again, we have the minor amendments and specific language associated to that. If it's a minor amendment, we don't need to hold 2 public hearings. Only one is needed. And then for either major or minor general plan amendments, finding of fact is required for the request. So we have a few questions that the applicant will need to answer during the application and review phase, and that will be presented and included within the staff report to P&Z and the City Council to help justify their request. Any questions regarding this chapter? Like I said, nothing's really changed from the last time. It's pretty standard language. Okay. This is the last chapter, the implementation program. And really what it does is it creates 4 categories, and it outlines the goals that are located in each of the chapters. So we have goal 1.1, 1.2, and that's out of the environmental chapter. Out of the chapter 2, we have all the goals associated to them, and then we also have a timeline. So the timeline is ongoing, 1 to 3 years, medium term, 4 to 6 years, and long term, 7+ years. And those categories is when that goal should be accomplished. Something that you might note is that some of these goals take up more than one department. So goal 1.1 is Public Works and Development Services Department. So we'd have a joint effort in terms of accomplishing that goal. This chapter is to be reviewed by staff yearly and really continuously with all projects coming forward, and kind of do a reassessment yearly if these categories, these time categories are still in line really with the plan. Any questions regarding this chapter?
I do, in terms of, now, when we look at the short-term, long-term, and medium-term, I'm assuming that when you're doing this, when you're looking at a long-term, you're going to be having specific goals and objectives over like a certain, say 2020, you would have a specific goals and objectives for a specific, on a specific timeline for a certain project. And if that were a long-term project, you would have it for this year, this year, this year, until you have reached the full build-up capacity.
Correct.
Okay.
It's meant that, for example, the long-term 7+ years, that goal would be accomplished by the 7th year.
Within 7 years.
Correct.
That's what I
That's
thought.
right. Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Anyone else have any questions, comments?
Okay.
So,
I think that's it.
Concerns?
pardon? Any
Criticisms, concerns?
well,
Okay. Well, I think that's it. So
okay.
the last chapter that we have is the land use chapter, and like I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, that will most likely be heard on August 27th. So we'll keep you in the loop. We'll send an email out to confirm that date.
Okay, and so to clarify with the motion, okay, you got that, okay. All right, thank you, Sydney, I appreciate your time and effort in that.
Thank you.
New business, Rudy, any
None this evening, Mr. Chairman.
information and reports?
None this evening.
None as well. Director's report,
No, sir.
all right. Selection of meeting dates, times, locations, and purpose. Do I hear a motion on the selection of meeting dates and times?
Commissioner Heck,
Yes, sir.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission hold a regular meeting on August 27th, 2019, and be held in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard. In the event there are no items to be brought forward to the commission, these meetings may be canceled. Notification of cancellation properly posted and the commission notified by staff.
Very good. Thank you. I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, I have a second. Roll call, Rudy.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner McGraw.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Yes.
Chairman Heck.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. For those in attendance, Sydney and all. This meeting is now adjourned.